How's it going, everybody? Welcome to a night episode of rebuilding the Volvo Penta. We almost have the floor and transom obviously all completed. Now we're kind of moving on to the motor piece. You can see here I've installed a new oil pan gasket. It looked like originally, I'm not sure if you remember in the prior episodes, but we had a little bit of oil seeping down here and I couldn't tell if it was the oil pan gasket or the rear main seal. So I went ahead and installed the new rear main seal. It's the same, pretty much the same process on a 5.7, 4.3, 5.8, 5.0. They're all pretty much the same. So keep in mind, try to service the items that you cannot get access to when it's in the boat, such as oil pan gasket, rear main seal. If you decide to wait on the front main seal, that's fine, because you can get to that in the boat. You just got to remove the harmonic balancer. So anyway, currently there's no oil obviously in the pan. We did some greasing around, a little bit of light oil in there, that's why you see that, so that's completely normal. What we're going to do now is we are going to install the flywheel. Okay, so this is your standard Ford flywheel. These Chevys use something similar. This is just a little bit heavier. I've actually explored looking for a lightweight version of a flywheel just to cut down on the drag that this thing causes. I think this is like almost like 40, or I think it's like 30, 35 pounds, I believe. But the only thing on a boat that you're using it for are the teeth. I think it's 158 teeth. That's the only reason you're using this. All this added weight is actually for nothing. If you do look for a different type of flywheel for your Ford or Chevy, it is super expensive. To get one that's all made out of aluminum, just to cut down on the friction of it having to spin, it's like $400. So it's going to be kind of tough to justify that in a boat. So just be aware. Alright, so this goes on before you put your flywheel on. So keep that in mind. I've also primed this one as well as the flywheel. This is the side that faces the motor, and you won't be able to get to this while it's installed in the boat. So anyway, this goes on first. Let's go ahead and install it, and we'll go ahead and then put the flywheel in place. Okay, so you can see here we've got the piece that holds the cover over the starter and also covers the lower section of the flywheel. Mainly this section I would assume is for protection and to keep debris from getting inside the engine mounts, the forward, or I guess rear engine mounts, the stern engine mounts if you would. Okay, and we got the flywheel installed now, so we are cooking. What we're going to do next is go ahead and grab the engine coupler. We're going to clean that up a little bit. I got a video on the engine coupler and what that's all about, what it's used for, so if you're curious, throw some comments in the comments field below and I'll help go over that for you. So you can see here the engine coupler does have a little bit of slight rust on that section. You want to clean that off, and then any kind of excess grease and whatnot that's in there, go ahead and work on cleaning that out. This one's pretty clean, so probably have to do minimum work on it. Alright, let's get started. Okay, believe it or not, the engine coupler, it only goes on one way, so if you're having trouble putting it on, keep spinning it around until it lines up perfectly, but that's completely normal to have that problem. Okay, so anyway, this next section you may be tempted to use some Loctite on it. You really don't have to. I've seen some people do it. You're putting 246 screws on here. We are going to torque them to a specific rating, so don't worry about putting Loctite on it. It will cook the seal if you do have to get it off later on. If you have to use Loctite and you're just one of those people, use blue Loctite. So anyway, but it's not required on this. Okay, so once you get the bolts, which are 9/16, tightened up, you may be wondering, I'm just gonna snug them up as tight as I can, right, and call it good? No, you also have to torque them down. So I wish I had better news, but if you do not have these, you cannot proceed to the next step in torquing it. There's no possible way to torque those without these. You may have seen these before. These are crow's feet. You can see I have the 9/16 out already because I was just using it not too long ago. And you will need the set. It's not that expensive. I think this whole thing, you can get, I have it in metric too. I've used it a few times. Pretty handy little tool set, and they are really strong. They don't flex a lot like you think they would. But yeah, you're gonna need this, specifically 9/16. It's the only way that you're gonna be able to torque those down. So like I said, I wish I had better news for you, but you are going to have to purchase it. So hopefully you watch this video ahead of time and you're not just watching it right now and saying, how am I going to torque it? Because if you go and put that motor in and you lose that engine coupler, it's going to be bad news. So anyway, go ahead and get you a set of crow's feet, as they're called, SAE crow's feet, and you can then proceed to the next step. Okay, so one of the tricks here, when you have your offset torque wrench, which mine's 40 foot-pounds, some of the 92 engines are 35 foot-pounds, by the way. But anyway, some of the tricks that I found, because this will try to rotate on you, is you can try to put a screwdriver in one side over there, and that will help keep it from moving. You can also have someone hold the front bolt where the harmonic balancer is, and that will help keep it from spinning as well. But anyway, I got mine torqued down. What we're going to do next is put on the stern mounts that actually pretty much completes the engine part of the process here, and I think at that point we're almost ready to put this thing in the boat. Alright, so we've got this installed. This is where the engine mount goes on the stern side, and if you remember hearing me talking about in the prior episodes, see there's that square edge in there on both sides. They only go in one way, and that piece where the mount is on the inside, where the transom plate is, has to go inside here. So anyway, let's go ahead and install the 4 bolts. There's some nuts in there as well that we will probably install here in just a bit, but we'll go ahead and get these 4 nuts installed, or 4 bolts. All right, it is the next day. And what I went ahead and did was torque down the bolts. They look pretty good. I also put the nut on this left side here, and I left it kind of loose because that's for another ground that's in the boat. This one actually has the starter ground and some other miscellaneous. I went ahead and torqued that one down as well. Take a look over here. We got the starter installed. Starter had, and the prior one that I did before, the starter, at least the material that covers it from the factory, stayed on. This one didn't for some reason. I'm not really sure. So this started to kind of flake off, and I was worried about corrosion. So I hit this with some marine paint as well to make sure it didn't rust. Went ahead and secured all the bolts there. It just makes it easier. The Ford only uses the 2 bolts to hold the starter in. Alright, there is one other little item I want to talk about, and that is located up here by the carburetor. All the OMCs, even some of the early Volvo Pentas, have it. You can see where it is coming out of that carburetor up there. So I'll go ahead and show you what I'm talking about now. You may have seen this red line if you still have a mechanical fuel pump. The early 90 models definitely are already busted. And even the late 90 model, I think what happens, maybe it's the alcohol or the ethanol that they put in your fuel, but it definitely dries these things out and they just crack and break. It's connected in the back of the carburetor, and it runs down your left valve cover, and we'll follow it here, and connects into your mechanical fuel pump. Now Volvo, or sorry, my OMC Cobra, I actually removed this and went to a electric fuel pump, so I didn't have this issue anymore. But basically, that line typically breaks at about right here. So if you ran into the same scenario like I did, you just literally had this red line kind of just hanging out here, and then it drips out this oily looking substance. I also noticed it was kind of clogged in this little 1/4 inch nipple that was coming out. So what it looks like it's doing is it's either venting off excess fuel or something along those lines, but it's flowing down into the carburetor, and either it's clogging up or, you know, it just looks like an absolute mess. It's probably likely that it's flowing into the fuel pump. So I went and stuck a pick in there, kind of cleaned it out a little bit, and then I bought some fuel line. This is 1/4 inch fuel line. Cleaned this nipple out so it had what appeared to be some even flow, and then using some zip ties, I went everywhere there was a zip tie holding that prior red line. I installed this new, here we go, you can see it up here. I installed it in place of this red one, and this thing is hard as a rock. You can see here, I mean, it doesn't bend very well, and I believe you can see it. Actually, I cut it already. I cut both ends, but there is actually a clog in there. And then you'll see it kind of wraps around the carburetor and plugs into the back. So that's something that I fixed. And just make sure if you are going to update it on your model that you go ahead and clean out the nipple. There's one on the carburetor side that typically gets clogged up, and there's one down here on the fuel pump that gets clogged up. So pretty easy fix if you're going to keep that. Okay, that is going to conclude all the steps that I found necessary on the motor to get this thing prepped and ready to drop in. Everything else I can do inside the boat, so I'm not too worried at this point, but that is it. Everything else looks good. Starter's installed. It is empty. There is no oil in this thing, but everything's torqued down and ready to rock and roll. So that's going to do it here for this episode. If you run into any major issues on yours, definitely take care of it before you put the engine in the boat. It just makes things a little bit harder. So this says all new filters on it, the oil filter and water separator / fuel filter, and replace that line up top, which would have been tricky. Everything's torqued up. So anyway, stay tuned to the next episode while we get this thing installed in the boat. Stay tuned, and we will catch you on the next episode. Have a good one, everybody.